RC enthusiasts. It's your host Tom Cogswell from Spektrum RC and Horizon Hobby, and I'm branching out into RC racing. And to do that, I want to learn more and teach you more about transmitter setups that you can utilize to really get the most out of your lap times. In these videos, we're going to be using the DX5 Pro. This radio is the competitive focused radio that we have developed for the racing scene. It's a great radio for pretty much anything, but it has some special settings and features that are available only on the DX5 Pro. Now, some of the things that we cover in this video, you might be able to use for on the DX5C, the DX5 Rugged, and things like that, but there will be some things, and I'll point them out as we go along, that the DX5 Pro is best suited for. First off, we're going to start talking about steering rates and travels. Setting up your travel properly is a super important step to getting a predictable turn out of your RC car. When you turn left or you turn right, you want to make sure that it's turning the same amount of radius on both right and left. And there is also ways to make it so that you can turn down your rate on that steering for the track setup that you are going to be racing at. So let's get down to the bench and learn more about what you can use on your transmitter to make your driving more predictable and to ultimately get better lap times at the track. Okay, we're down here on the bench with our DX5 Pro, and I have an oldie but a goldie, a 10 SETE from TLR. It's a kit that I built many years ago. It still works great. I like to use it for racing, or at least I'm going to. It's been a basher for a little while, so that's why it's a little rusty, but I'm going to go ahead and use it as our demonstration kit for this tutorial. So the first thing to set up is your servo sub trim. So on my vehicle, I've got the arm attached where it was powered on at a 90 degrees. So let's go ahead and go over that. I've got my radio turned on. Let's power on our truck. And when everything's powered up and it's your servo centered, your arm should be pretty close to 90 degrees to the body of the servo, as you see here. My wheels are a little cantered off. You can use your turnbuckles to adjust that, or you can use your sub trim. So to get into the sub trim menu, we're gonna click the scroll wheel and you're gonna go down to sub trim. Of course, you're gonna have sub trim for all the channels, but we're talking about steering or STR here. And you're gonna use that to adjust up or down or left or right on your transmitter to adjust the center point of the servo, essentially. Right now, mine is pretty well in the center. I think it's pretty good to get started, but you're gonna go up and down till your arm is right at center and that your wheels are pretty much pointing straight on your truck. So I'm gonna adjust it just a tad, just to kind of maybe get it just right. So I'm just looking down the vehicle and making sure both my wheels are looking like they're gonna travel straight when I go. So you've got your sub trim set, but you might be thinking, well, why can't I just use my trim for that? So I got a B trimmer here, and that's gonna trim my steering when I use it. What's the difference between trim and sub trim? And let me explain that to you. So essentially what sub trim is doing is, at the same time, it is changing the center point, but it's also changing where the travel endpoints end up. And you can see that like on this graph here that I'm gonna show you guys, that when you move sub trim, it's moving it to the left one way or to the right the other way. So your values, your travel values, which we're gonna cover here in just a second, are changing at the same time. So now that you understand that, let's look at travel. So go to the list, or one quick thing that you can do if you just go up to sub trim and hit select, you can change it to travel. You have all these different ones that you can choose from. We got travel, and by default, we're gonna have 100R and 100L, or 100 right and 100 left. But if you look at my monitor screen, because I put in sub trim, you'll see that turning full right, it's not actually giving me negative 100%, it's giving me negative 104. And then when we go to the left, you'll see I'm only getting around 89. Interesting. So that is what's going on there, is that the sub trim, like I said, has shifted the whole graph a little bit on our steering. That's fine, that works fine for us. But that's one difference between sub trim and actual trim. So actual trim is not gonna change where the endpoints are at. It's only gonna change where the center point is at, and that's what you use while you're driving to trim your drives, essentially. So, speaking of travel, what you wanna do is to get the full travel out of your vehicle without binding the linkages. So We're gonna move it over here so you guys can have a better look. We'll get a closer look. And when you give it full right, you're gonna hold full right. You're gonna click on the 100R. So when you move your steering, you'll see it will select one box and then the other. That's good. All right, so we're gonna go full right, and we're gonna increase this number or decrease it. So if you can tell, I'm increasing it, but nothing's moving. My arm's pulling, my servo arm's moving, but it's not, the wheels aren't moving. So something's binding up, so that's too much. So essentially what you wanna do is change this number until you get to the end stop. So as I go down, you'll see it's decreasing the travel. So I wanna keep going until I see my wheels stop moving, essentially. And maybe a little less than that, just so you can reduce any kind of binding to avoid, essentially you just want to avoid binding either way. So on mine, I think 90 looks like a good rate there, a good travel, because, and I'm looking at my wheels here, I can tell that my left wheel is hitting the lower A arm there. It's almost on the other side, but that's where my binding is happening there. You don't want the wheel to be binding up against the A arm. It's gonna cause some travel issues. So then we do the same thing to the left. So we turn left, we adjust this number. Oh, I can get a little bit more. See that? You can almost hear it hit. So I think I'm a little too much. And this all depends on the servo's geometry, your steering geometry, how all the linkages attach, and things like that. So we've set our travel to get the maximum endpoint out of our travel that we want. Now let's cover how the travel function should be utilized for your racing setups. For your overall travel, it's the best practice to set your max travel so that the turning radius is the same going left and right. This will make the driving more predictable, and you can do this in a parking lot. This is a great place for it. If it's a nice, evenly paved parking lot that you can just do full circles in, I would suggest doing that. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna turn all the way right, and you're gonna keep driving and getting a nice, even circle. And you're gonna say, okay, that looks good. That's about as much as I want. And then you're gonna do the same thing to the left. You're gonna notice that one way you're gonna have larger circles than the other circle. You're gonna wanna make it so that they're about the same. Now, keep note that we ended up with our steering travel when we set it up on the bench at 90 for right and 124 for left. We don't want to go above those numbers. That is the point of binding, essentially. So we're going to turn those numbers down, or at least one or the other, until that we're getting a predictable and equal steering rate out of both ends. So we're going to adjust those numbers until we have equal travel and equal steering radiuses going left or right. So while you guys are out here at the parking lot, another good thing that you can do is to do some trim runs. And by that I mean just do some straight runs up and down the parking lot on this paved parking lot here to trim it so that it's as straight as possible. Trimming, you're going to use the B trimmer. That's what it's set at by default. If you've changed that, go ahead and use that trimmer. Normally it should be the B trimmer, and you're going to use that trim to get it to go as straight as possible. Once you've got the trim straightened out and you have nice even turning both left and right direction, it's time to get to the track. Now that you have your travel endpoints set, let's cover the steering rate function. So on your radio, there's a rate function. So if we go down, you're gonna see rates. This is a very helpful place to adjust your steering rate on the fly. So every track is different. There are tighter or shallower turns, varying surfaces like clay, carpet, and dirt. And one of the things that you should strive to dial in during practice is to find a rate that for your full travel that works best for that track. This will help maximize your steering resolution and decrease lap times. One thing that you'll notice if your travel is maxed out is that you will constantly be turning your wheel to find that sweet spot for a particular turn. And one way to help achieve this is to use your rates so that when you are at full steer, you're hitting the sweet spot and not overshooting it and hitting the wall, or undershooting it and not making the turn predictably. Here's an example of me driving on this oval track. My rates are just too high, and I'm constantly fighting myself to make a nice, even, and predictable turn. What I can do to help with this is to go into the rate menu. All right, so let's go into the rate menu, and I'll show you guys how to use that for racing. We've got the rates menu here. You'll have steering here, but you can also select other ones. We'll go to steering because that's what we're talking about. and it'll have a rate 100% on, and then you can select an OTF. What this means is on the fly, or something that you can adjust rates with as you're driving, which is what I would suggest doing. So you'll go to D, which is this trimmer here. And when we move the D switch, you'll see that the rate percentage there goes down. So as I go towards myself or up, it goes down, and then the other way, it goes up. You're gonna use this switch or this trimmer to dial in that perfect turn for that track. So now that you see what the D trimmer is doing to our rate with the on-the-fly feature, you'll see that I can adjust the travel accordingly. I can trim down, reducing travel, until I feel like my full steer is getting me around the corner turn exactly how I want it to. Now, let's say you get knocked off track or you need more steering travel. You don't want to just hold this until you get more steering travel. Let's say you get stuck into a corner and you need to get full steering. That's what the override feature is for. So you'll notice that with the F button, which is this one that I have here, that's the way what I have assigned to set my override to 100%, is when I hit the F button, I'm holding full steer. I hit it, it gives me full steer. So this is helpful to get you out of a hard spot when you've been knocked off track, or if you just need full steer for whatever reason. It's a quick press of the button, turn of the wheel, and it gives you that full travel that you dialed in earlier. Let go, and you're back to your lowered rate that you have set with your D trimmer. So now that I've got that set, I'm ready to go route racing, and hopefully I can be more competitive on this track. All right, RC car racing enthusiasts, thank you for joining me on my adventure in learning how to better utilize your Spektrum transmitter for RC car racing. Again, I'm not an expert on this, and I'm learning with you, and I want to pass along the knowledge that I have, that I learned from the other experts here at Horizon Hobby to you on this video series. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and stay tuned for our next episode where we're going to be talking about how to use the DX5 Pro to get the best drag runs out of your no prep drag racers. Thanks for watching. See you next time.